started. I'd like to get started. We are missing one candidate. Actually, we're missing two candidates, but one of them is here. Cecchinelli is going to join us, right? My name is Greg Reibman. I'm president of the chamber. Delighted to have you with us today. I'm going to ask Robert, how's the sound if I talk like this? Good?
Yeah, this has to use the mic.
You want me to use the mic? Okay. So we're going to ask the candidates all to use the mic. Is this where you want it, Robert? Okay, so to pass the mics around so that we can record it, we're recording both for our own streaming, and I'll hold on to this for a second, and also we're Facebook Living, and New TV is here. So we're delighted to have you all here. My name is Greg Reibman, president of the chamber. The purpose of this event is to find out which of our candidates for mayor are morning people, and we'll do that this morning. One of our candidates, Rich Saunders, was unable to attend. He had a work-related thing, and we can all relate to that as business people, but we're delighted to have everyone else here. A couple of rules. We're going to try to keep this as informal as possible. Knowing that time is short, we're going to keep it to 90 minutes. I know we figured out once with 7 candidates in 90 minutes, that meant everybody had about 12 minutes to speak, which is not a long time to get to know everybody, but we will do our best to try to keep it that way. So I just ask candidates that you don't filibuster, that you don't repeat yourself, and I will reserve the right to interrupt you if it seems like it's going on too long. And you can also speak up when you think it's appropriate. But we will want to share the microphones so that we can record it properly. Okay? Let me just see if I forgot anything in the sort of general house rules. But I don't think so. I think we're good. I did tell the candidates so we know kind of written notes and everything, so we're going to have them speak from the heart today. One question for the audience. How many undecided voters do we have today? Show of hands. Some and hopefully some more will be watching us when we record this. Okay, so rather than opening statements, so I want each of you to introduce yourself, tell us a little about yourself. I want to kind of start with a question, which will allow you to get it to know who you are. And if you could start by telling us the best job and the worst job you've ever had, and we're going to start at Al's side there. Yes, sorry. So when you hold the mics, candidate, hold them from the bottom. Is this connected, Robert?
There we go. Is that all right?
Good. Al, we're going to have to move on. So Robert will adjust the mics, but we will move forward. Okay. So go ahead. Tell us about the best job and the worst job that you've had, and just introduce yourself as well.
Okay. Hi, I'm Al Cecchinelli, and I think the best job I've ever had is the job I currently have of being an uncle. I have a niece and 2 nephews that are going to Newton Public Schools. Actually, one of them is spending his last year at Day Junior High. He's going to be going to St. Sebastian's next year to play hockey. But I find that having them in my life has given me a new purpose, and it's wonderful being an uncle. I get to spoil them and then send them home.
And the worst job?
The worst job, I would have to say, would be cleaning the grease trap when I worked at McDonald's in high school. Horrible. We called it the lunchbox, but that was very sarcastic.
Great. Councilor Sangiolo.
So I'm Amy Sangiolo. So the best job I ever had was working with the National Wildlife Federation, where I was working on Senator Kerry's flood insurance reform bill, and I got to lobby on Capitol Hill and also do some dirt digging on Senator Al D'Amato. The worst job that I ever had was probably doing the code call telemarketing stuff to raise funds for, I think it was some environmental group, but I didn't like doing that. I didn't like bothering people and trying to just extract money from them.
Very good. Councilor Scott Lennon.
Scott Lennon, good morning, everyone. So the best job that I've ever had, well, they're all learning experiences, so I don't know what the worst one is, but the best job I ever had is the one I currently have now, working for the Middlesex Sheriff's Office as the Assistant Budget Director, being able to manage that budget, responsible for outcomes. It's a great feeling to get things accomplished. The worst job I ever had was I was the maitre d' for one night at Anthony's Pier 4. One night. I'm not going to get into details. That was the worst job.
Great. Geoffrey Woodward.
I would say one of the best jobs is being a citizen of Newton. I've enjoyed working with the Newton Tree Conservancy, and also I would say also being a student of my parents. I would say. I would say maybe the most challenging job is that I actually was the sole recipient of the amputated limbs out of the operating room at Walter Reed and had to process the tissues. And so that was a challenging job, I should say.
Okay. City Councilor Ruthanne Fuller.
Thanks, Greg. The best job I've ever had, the one I have right now as city councilor. This is a great job. Important challenges that we're facing, great people to work with. It's just terrific. Close second is the first strategic planner at WGBH. The hardest job I ever had.
The worst job.
The worst job. It was the worst job. I was the stock person at the Oakland Community College, their bookstore. That was a terrible job.
Great. And Newton resident Ellie Katzoff.
Thank you.
Yep.
Got it right on. So I would say the best job I've ever had by far is running my own small company right now. Nothing's been more challenging. It's taught me so much about the business world, how to work with others, the complexities of managing a small business in Newton. It's fascinating. The worst job I ever had, I worked at a fish factory for a while where I had to descale fish all day. It was miserable. It's one of those nightmare things you just never want to relive in your life.
Great, thank you. All right, so let's get down to it. Newton's villages are the heart and soul of our community. They really are what identifies us, a lot of reason why people love living here. But they've also really suffered greatly, as you all know. Problems with store vacancies, mom and pop retail stores suffer from competition from Amazon and online and shopping malls. And there's been, just lots of challenges there where banks often occupy prime real estate spots and nail salons, but it's been hard to attract and make sure that our villages remain vibrant. So I'm going to start with Councilor Sangiolo. What could you do as mayor to ensure the vibrancy or to help grow the vibrancy of our villages?
So I think the first thing that we need to do is do community-based planning, particularly in our villages. We need to work with our residents and the businesses that are already there, find out what works, find out what the needs are, particularly for our residents. If we want people to come to our village centers, we need to have storefronts and retail that actually services their needs. In terms of other ways to bring in village vibrancy, instead of just looking at bringing in density, we also have to look at bringing in community spaces. That's why when I look at places like Newton Center and the parking lot, I would like to see a real community space, whether it's a park, whether it's a cultural center. I'm not saying eliminate the parking, put the parking underneath, but have something that draws everybody to the center.
Great. Councilor Lennon?
Thank you, Greg. One of the things I think that we need to look at is I'm someone who supported the mixed-use villages in our village centers. I do think that density allows more mixed retail on the first floor, housing above. We're developing a customer base for those villages. I think that that's important. I think it is important, as Councilor Sangiolo, to understand what these smaller businesses need. They need to know that they have a resource here in the city. They need to know that City Hall will be working with them effectively and how they can move their business forward. One of the things I've always been struck by is going village center to village center, talking to some of the small business owners, is how difficult it is to just get small things done to help improve their business. As an example, I've had a number of business owners in Nonantum tell me that they'd like extra signage, or they'd like an ability to have wayward signage to know where people are, the ability to have more parking. It's the mechanism of going out to talk to them about what they need and know that City Hall can talk to them. I also think the Chamber can be an effective partner, and I also think that the Economic Development Commission could be an effective partner. But proactive planning will definitely help plan for our future, look at those mixed uses, look at how we can build commercial and customer base for them, and how we can move our city forward.
Great. Mr. Woodward?
Yes, I think a good example of what you're talking about is the closing of the New England Mobile Book Fair and then moving down actually closer to your offices. Tom Lyons told me that he felt that the owner, that Newton wasn't really very business friendly, and that he had several offers from surrounding villages or surrounding cities to move there. And I guess eventually he moved to next to the Marshall's Mall, but he says only temporarily because he doesn't feel he can afford it. And so I would try to, find incentives to make businesses stay. Because I think certain businesses, like the New England Mobile Store, isn't just a business, it's like a refuge for the
Do you have a specific idea in terms of those kinds of incentives? I mean, in the case of the book fair, that was a independent developer who offered a space and saw the need and rose up. It was not anything that was done on a municipal level.
Right.
So as mayor, what could you do?
Well, sort of like what they did with General Electric, giving people, businesses tax breaks, drawing it from Connecticut to Boston. Also what Scott mentioned is signage. Actually, a lot of, it seems like something petty to us, but actually to a lot of businesses, I don't know if people know, there is the Newton inspectors that go around and will fine you $30 a day, I believe, if your signs don't conform to certain standards.
We will get to that. Councillor Fuller, the same question. What would you do to help our villages become vibrant?
You're right. Our villages have to be walkable and vibrant. It's great for us as residents and as customers, and it's critical for them as businesses to be able to grow and thrive here. And you're right, Amazon.com is really changing the landscape. We know Newtonville books couldn't succeed in Newtonville. It's giving a try in Newton Center, and we've got to help them. Here's a number of things we have to do. This week I was talking to the owner of Limited Editions in Newton Highlands, Joanne. First thing on her mind was parking, not just for her customers, but for her employees. So having a parking plan for all of Newton Highlands really matters. I was talking last week to the owner of Central, Chris, it's in Newton Center. You know what his biggest problem was? The sewage backup into his finished basement because of the city of Newton, and it took us a couple of days to get there. So having our infrastructure work matters. Transportation matters, not just for our cars, but for walking and biking. How do we get people in and out of these village centers in an appropriate and safe way? Yes, zoning reform also matters, so that we proactively decide what our village centers look like. We create a master plan, so it's better for our business owners if they can have a predictable outcome when they come to the city of Newton, so they know what we want. And it's better for us. Let's envision in Newton Center, let's have a master plan for all of the business district so we can figure out what happens to the parking triangle. Is it better as open space, a gathering space, a community space? Does it need to be parking? Is it a mix of retail and office? What happens on that block where Johnny's is? It's 1 story right now. Could that be 4 stories with a mix of retail, 2nd floor office, 3rd and 4th floor housing, so that we've got millennials living there, seniors a place to downsize, affordable housing so that if a waiter wants to be able to live here in Newton, he or she has a place to live.
Good. Some good specific ideas there I want to get back to in a minute, but Ellie Katzoff?
Yeah, so it's a similar approach for me. When I think about I know firsthand, being a small business owner, what it's like operating a business within Newton. One of the biggest problems is foot traffic. We don't have people coming to the village centers in the way that we need. As a result, people just don't want to open up. My roommate tried to open up a coffee shop and had to go out of business. He sold it off to a friend because there was just not enough foot traffic. So we need to get people coming in. And the problem is that when I think about like millennials and people my age in general, nobody says the words, "Oh, let's go to Newton tonight." Never. They say, "Yeah, let's go to Cambridge, JP, all the other places." And it's because they don't have reasons to come here. So we need to look at what kinds of businesses we're bringing in to attract younger people and older people alike. Not just right now the sort of lack of a better word, the 1% that tends to come and frequent a lot of the shops in Newton Center and that we cater to in Newton Center as a result. That's just one example is Newton Center, to be clear. I find this across the board in Newton. But I think that so I think that in short, if we really take a look at what kinds of shops are opening up, if we really push local shops and not just chains, if we really think about also bringing in industry nearby the area so that those local service-based industry service-based industry shops can service the larger industry that comes in nearby, I think we can create a place where it's sustainable to open a shop and attractive for younger people and older people like to come in and frequent.
So let me ask everybody here a question, and Ellie, you can take it first if you want. So generally speaking, when a new developer wants to come in and build a project, we ask them as a city to do lots of things, either add affordable units of housing or maybe fix the streets or the sidewalks. Paul Roberts from Newtonville Camera emailed me yesterday and said, what about requiring the developers offer independent retailers a break on rent? Anybody there like that idea? Anybody?
Yeah, I actually would love that idea. I know a lot about the Newtonville Camera issue. I do filmmaking for a living, and I've been kind of keeping a very close eye on where Newtonville Camera is going to go because I think it's a staple of Newton.
Anybody else specifically on that issue? Just pass that down. Yeah.
I think it's a great idea to have those conversations. I also think it's something to look at in terms of relocation. When we were talking about the New England Mobile Book Fair or Newtonville Camera, about working with a potential applicant or developer to look at relocation, how you could help move those individuals to other parts of the city. But again, I will come back and say that I do think the city needs to be more of a resource in doing that as well.
Great. Did you want to add something, Councilor Fuller? I mean, Sangiolo. Sorry. Go ahead. You're trying.
So I agree with what Scott is saying. I mean, we definitely have to work with developers to make sure that they offer the spaces, particularly because they're displacing other businesses. And we don't want to lose our businesses, particularly the local businesses. What I would hate to see is a whole bunch of big box businesses come in. We want to grow our local economy. What Scott was saying about the city being a resource for our businesses, yes, we should have been. We haven't been. And that's one thing as mayor I will make sure that we do.
So one question before you pass it back. So Councilor Fuller mentioned the idea of being able to build up on these single-story buildings in our village centers.
I absolutely think that's a wonderful idea. That's the way to increase density. That's moderate growth in our village centers, and that will bring in not only the customer base for our local businesses, but also the much-needed housing.
Any idea how we make that affordable for the property owners of those buildings?
We have to talk about we have to give them incentives. We have to, perhaps what they need is additional parking. Perhaps what they need is other types of assistance or even loans, if we can do that, provide loans for the businesses to incentivize them to, again, grow the residential space on top of their existing. And I think zoning comes into play because what we could do is create overlay zones in our village centers in order to accommodate that. And by doing that, we'll streamline the permitting process.
How tall is too tall?
That's a conversation that the city needs to have.
How tall do you think too tall is?
I would like to see 3-4-story buildings within our village centers. I think
Anybody here have an idea how tall too tall is? Just a number? You don't need a microphone to tell me a number?
I actually agree that 3-4 stories.
Okay, Councilor Fuller, you wanted to say something else too, I think.
I just want to agree that
Yeah.
I think you have to look at it village by village,
Yeah.
business district by business district. I don't think you could put a flat, whatever story it should be.
Okay.
So let me go back to your first question, if that's okay, because you asked a really tricky one,
Yep.
which is, are we going to offer John, who's this great store, a tax break to relocate here in Newton? That was the question.
Yeah, or even require that the developer do that as part of the things we ask them
Right.
to do, instead of asking them to do some of the other things, hopefully, because there's
Okay,
only so
so-
much burden you can put on a developer.
So here's a couple of ways to think about this. First of all, the city of Newton, the city council who is doing this permitting and thinking through the mitigation, we've never had a sophisticated understanding of actually what the developers' return on investment and profits are. So I've always felt like we've been a little bit throwing darts, deciding how much mitigation to ask for. That's one area in the planning department that we need to really bolster so that when a developer comes forward, we do have a sophisticated understanding. We want them to survive and thrive here and locate here. At the same time, we want to get the appropriate mitigation for the city. And do you know what? I think we've been guessing too much. Let's increase our ability to really understand what's happening to the developer and what should happen to the city. And then we can parcel it out. How much goes into our sewer fund? How much goes into redesigning an intersection? How much do we demand perhaps that they help their new tenants? That's the only way we
Okay,
can.
I'm going to move on. We can come back to some of these ideas. Al, go ahead. Yeah. Yeah.
I think parking is one of the major concerns. And I think with the mixed use in the centers of our villages, that's just going to add more retail and make it less easy for you guys to make your rent and get your customers. There's going to be more competition. I like the idea of the expanding the height of the buildings, but again, it's a village by village basis. I don't think that it fits in some villages. I do think it fits in others.
So, Mr. Cecchinelli, can I ask you a question? So,
Yeah, sure.
related to parking. So, Mr. Katzoff suggested, and I think actually no, he's the only one of the six of you, I believe, who rode his bike here today. But that we actually need to be able to accommodate more than just people in cars to solve this problem. Do you agree with that, or do you think?
I agree. We share the roads with the bicycles. I think that there's a balance that we have to reach. Recently in Cambridge on Brattle Street, they took a two-lane one-way and turned it into a one-lane one-way. They kicked the parking from the curb out into one of the driving lanes and put 2 bike lanes. I think that might be a little aggressive, but I think we need to find some way to live with each other on the roads.
Does anybody here disagree that we need more bike accommodations? No, everybody agree. Everybody agrees we need that. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next
Actually,
topic.
one other thing
All
is,
right, quickly, please.
I think we're missing an opportunity to market the city of Newton on the web and maybe in advertising. You see, other places, come to our city. Well, Newton should have a better campaign with that, and I think that the Chamber of Commerce and the city would be a great, team to work on that. Ellie is a filmmaker. Maybe we can get
Great.
you
So
involved.
I'm gonna move us on.
Yeah, okay.
So the next thing is when I talk to business owners, the largest employers to the smallest companies, the restaurants, mom and pop stores, biotech companies, life sciences companies, people that work in these buildings in this park here, they say their common number one problem is they can't find the workers that they need. We have the lowest unemployment. The state is low unemployment. Nationally, it's low. In this particular area, it's even lower. It's some of the lowest in the state, which is a wonderful thing, but a huge challenge. Now, a lot of times the problem here is that there's not any place for these workers to live, and it's really difficult to get here because of our public transportation system. I'm going to start with Councilor Lennon this time. What do we do? How can you, as mayor, help businesses attract and bring the workers here and accommodate them, especially knowing that 2 of the key things that prevent them from being here is not enough affordable housing or any housing for our workers and not an adequate public transportation system?
Well, thank you, Greg. Well, first thing, I think as mayor, I'm someone who is going to be a very strong advocate for Newton, going to work with the DOT about improving transit here in the city of Newton. And not only just the volume, but the frequency, I think, is very important. I'll use the example of Austin Street and Washington Place, where we're doing developments right in the transportation corridor. We are putting units there that are going to be affordable in perpetuity in each of those. But what we've heard, a lot of the conversation about Washington Place and Austin Street has been the ability to utilize, haphazard bus service, getting down to train stations that aren't exactly accessible. I think you need a strong advocate in the corner office who's working with our state delegation, working with the DOT in terms of explaining to the DOT that we are building ridership in their area. In terms of housing, I think it's a great question. I know in the Wells Avenue area, we were talking about a housing development here for quite some time. I think for me, one of the big problems was the second means of egress, which I know continues to be a conversation with business owners here in the Wells Avenue area. But again, I think we need to look at creative ways to find affordable units like we're doing in those mixed-use developments with our accessory apartment ordinance, trying to find more smaller, affordable units that people can take advantage of in the city of Newton and dedicate some of our inclusionary zoning, like we're talking about, towards workforce housing. The police, the fire, the teachers, the workers who are coming into Newton each day to work. I think it's vitally important, and we need to continue to look to ways to do that.
Great. Mr. Woodward, in your interview with the TAB, I guess last week, you expressed some skepticism about building more of these big housing workforce development mixed-use buildings. Help us understand that in terms of this question. How do we help our employers fill jobs? If you could pass the mic.
Well, I'm not opposed to workforce development housing. I think, you know, when I first completed my PhD, I worked at NIH, and the perimeter gate is surrounded by $1 million homes, and I thought to myself, really, do they expect people to, you know, work at a place, and where are they going to live with $1 million homes located just next door? So I think Scott's idea of worker-focused housing is a great idea, and as far as, you know, as Scott has also mentioned, he doesn't feel that every village center should be like dug up and have the wrecking ball taken to and redeveloped. But affordable housing for workers and also transportation is vital and important. On the other hand, I think also in our society, I mean, this is more of a cultural thing. I think we often, as far as recruiting people for the workforce, we have a little bit of tunnel vision in that we have very specific specifications, you know, for what is required for doing the job. And if people don't fit that, we don't adapt and see that they, you know, think that they can actually learn on the job, can mold to the job. And I think that's another concept that we should try to adhere to. I've seen that applied in other countries.
I think, you know, certainly there's a challenge with having people have the right skills, but there really is a challenge with getting people who can actually afford to get to their job at the restaurant down the street that's not connected to the Green Line or to the small store and to these places here that are not connected to public transportation. Councillor Foley, want to add something to that?
Sure. So this is a great question because you have to be able to think at a really big, comprehensive level about Greater Boston, economic development, transportation, housing, and then you have to apply it here in Newton and actually get some real traction right now and get some changes here. Lucky, I've worked in the business sector as a management consultant, in the nonprofit world as a strategic planner, and here in city government, have just those skills to think about complex challenges like this. So what do we do here in Newton? First of all, you do actually have to have a comprehensive plan. I say over and over again, we're dependent on a successful commercial office retail sector here in Newton because we're looking to grow you so you can help us with your tax base so we can have our great schools and our great public safety and the streets that work and the water and sewer system that works. So we need you to be able to find your workers and get them here. On the ground, what is that going to mean with transportation? It's going to mean a lot of things. It does mean literally making sure our streets and our sidewalks are safe and in good condition so people who want to bike, who want to walk, have a way to do that. So that we have smart traffic lights so that traffic moves more easily. But we also actually have to shovel the snow and plow the streets. Wells Office Avenue, the Wells Office Park, shut down in 2015 in the storms because the city couldn't keep up with getting the snow out of the entrance and exit here. So you got to do that. With housing, we got to proactively think about where we are going to put it. Do we want additional housing? I think we do. We need it to be near mass transit wherever is possible. Proactively zone and plan, have individual master plans for our Newton Center. I'd also say, had we had a proactive master plan for Needham Street, I am convinced that we could have kept TripAdvisor here in Newton. Sorry if any of you are from Needham, and not lost them to across the thing. Needham proactively thought about redeveloping their city. We didn't. Had we had a master plan for Needham Street and the end of Needham Street when Northland's going, boy, that could have been our anchor tenant.
Great, good. Mr. Katzoff.
Yeah, so I've actually run into this issue firsthand as a small business owner, having to actually go as far as to try to relocate some of my employees to Newton, and struggled so much that I couldn't do it. And that's because if you look at when houses are being sold for $1.1 million, and that's the average, or the median rather, that's outrageous. You can't move here and work here. It just doesn't work. I have a friend who came from Israel to work in the tech industry in Newton. They're living in Burlington. They commute here hour and a half every day. That's unacceptable. We need to create affordable housing. When I say affordable housing, I'm not talking about $70,000 housing. I mean affordable housing that in a way that we can all agree is affordable. So that if you're working in the tech industry or if you're working in a service industry out here, you can find places to live. And I think that the way to do that, because it's easy just to say we should just do it, everyone says that. I think the way to do that is to look very carefully at our village centers, look very carefully at where we can place some of this, but more importantly, to look at alternative options so that things like communal housing, for example, people get very weirded out, like, oh, you're just a hippie talking about it. No, communal housing is one alternative option that can both bring in people that are lower income, so to speak, or that can at least, maybe afford to live here, but also where they can take care of each other so that with our aging population and seniors that right now are being pushed out of Newton, they can work with the other people that are working within Newton to work with each other and get to know each other and just live happy lives. Because I think that's the other question, is sort of the quality of what it's going to be like to live in Newton while you work in Newton.
Great. Mr. Cecchinelli.
Thank you. I think we have to look at what we envision in Newton. Are we going to be a feeder community for Boston? Are we going to be a moderate to high income area? Or are we going to be a place where there's a lot of housing for people that can't afford to live in Boston or Newton? I'm lucky. I live in the house that my dad was born in. If not for that, I wouldn't be able to live in Newton. But I think that we need to address what affordable housing is. Right now, I believe it's $70,000 or less a year on your income to be eligible for a 40B low-income housing project in Newton. That's to me, that's not low income. I think that's a disingenuous number. I think if we want to do this, we really should do this. We need to have incentives.
So do you have a specific idea what that would be?
Well, we need to have incentives, property tax incentives. But if we give a property tax incentive, we need to have that property perpetually as a low-income property. We need to work better with the federal government. Section 8 housing. We need to sign up people to have tenants in as Section 8 housing. As far as finding workers, I believe that President Trump's raise immigration reform is a great idea. We bring in the people that we want and need in this country. And I think that that's going to help us to find the workers we need.
Councilor Sangiolo.
So I see three things that we need to do. Affordable housing, definitely we need to increase, and we need to increase it on all different levels. I think we need to really look at our public transportation and our infrastructure. But the third thing that we really do need to do is look at not just the people that we want to attract, but what those amenities that the people we want to attract want to have here in the city. That's the piece that I don't think we've really focused on. Sure, we can build more, increase our density, look at our village centers. That makes a lot of sense. Build more smaller units in order for them to be affordable. Not just look at the lower end, but all the different income levels. The public infrastructure and in terms of public transportation, we have to, as Scott had mentioned, we have to go and lobby with our state and our federal government to make sure that the funds are there to increase our service and ridership, not just not just the frequency, but also the actual infrastructure. We should increase in terms of the commuter rail, add more car lines, add more trains, run the trains back and forth, not just downtown to Boston, but also out to Framingham. In terms of I just lost my track. Oh, shuttling. We should definitely increase the number of shuttle services that we have so we can get people from the train stations over here to the office parks. And the third piece, when I was talking about the amenities that we need to build into our city, when I went to TripAdvisor, when you had a forum there on business improvement districts, I was talking to somebody over at TripAdvisor, and I said, what is your demographic here? Where do your employees live? And they said their employees, the young ones, live in Cambridge and Somerville because that's where the action is happening. That's what Ellie was talking about. Because there are lots of restaurants, there are lots of fun things to do for their workers. It's not just having the housing here that's going to bring people in. There is housing over here in Needham, I think it's called Charles River Landing, which is close by. The older, as people grow older, the young workforce, and they want to settle down and get married and have kids, they look to communities like Needham and Newton to move into because of the great school system, and it's not as lively and fun or entertaining as Somerville. But that's where the villages come into play. We can grow those, make those more vibrant, and that's where our young workforce can go.
Great, thank you. So Councilor Fuller mentioned losing businesses to Needham or Waltham or Burlington, and that we don't just lose businesses who move out. We've had a few of those, Clark's and TripAdvisor examples, Shark Ninja, who've moved to Needham, not that I'm complaining, And also there's been some discussion here about the regulations and how much red tape there is. And somebody has to ask you, Newton has a reputation as being a really tough place to do business. Tough place to open a business, large or small, tough place to be here. There's that long, unwieldy process going through special permit process and everything. Does anybody here disagree that Newton's reputation is deserved? Does Newton deserve its reputation?
Somewhat.
Do we deserve the reputation as being a hard place, or is that like totally unfair that Newton is painted that way?
Go ahead, Ellie. You can start. You haven't started.
Go ahead.
Sure. I mean, I think it's unfortunate. That's the short answer. It's unfortunate, but it is fair. It's a reality that we need to change. It's really that
So
simple.
everybody thinks it's so. How do we change it? I would love to hear an idea, not just that someone acknowledging it's a problem. How do we change that reputation? Really, what's the process there? And Councilor Fuller, you want to start?
So the contrast between our neighbor in Needham and Newton is stark, and we can literally look to the best practices right next door. So Needham, 10 years ago, wrestled with the question of whether they should do tax increment financing. It's a hard question. It's a difficult one. They thought it through. They came up with a policy. 5, 6, 7 years ago, they did a comprehensive plan of what they wanted Needham to do in terms of housing, businesses, and transportation. They came up with a plan. They proactively changed their zoning in order to reflect their goals, and you're seeing the success that they have. Their people are known for being cordial, flexible, and welcoming. Those are all things that we can learn from them. It means that we as a city, as a mayor, as a city council, have to proactively think about what's going to be a successful Newton in terms of housing and economic development and transportation. Let's plan it. Zoning reform's going on. It holds a lot of promise. That zoning reform has to match the vision. And then you do need the individual master plans for each of our commercial corridors and village centers that align with that. We can do that. We've seen Needham do it. I've seen Somerville do it. Zoning reform, it's planning, it's being proactive. Last thing, internally, you gotta manage the city well so that we literally fix our pipes, we plow the roads, our streets are maintained. You gotta do it, and you gotta do it well. The basic business of running a city. We can do that, and by the way, I'm voting yes on the charter question, in part because I think the size of the city council is one of the inhibitors for us being a welcoming and proactive community when it comes to business.
Councilor Lennon, so you've been running the council for a number of years as president, and you're very familiar with this process. How do we speed up and make this process less bureaucratic? And if you're mayor, how do you make it even better than it is than just by running the city council? We're still very burdened by this whole thing.
So I'm very proud of my leadership on the city council. I think we've taken some proactive steps to really help the permitting process, but in terms of helping more so on the homeowner side, having homeowners that come in that are a little skeptical about the special permit granting authority process to come in, and if they have smaller projects that they want to address, adding a little bit of FAR, looking at certain things with regard to home ownership and improving their quality of life in their home. We've really helped to try to streamline that and move that through the council. One of the things that I've heard, Greg, most often is a little bit to what Councilor Fuller was saying. People look at the city under one big umbrella. So when they come in and have to work on a permit, and they come in and do a development review team meeting, and then they meet with engineering, and then they meet with ISD, and then they meet with a number of different departments. By the time it gets to the city council, we may dock it in one evening, take it up in one evening, and move it along. But petitioners don't see that. They see the full umbrella, and it does take a long time. But we've tried to help move that along. In terms of the larger projects,
So back up though. So
Yep.
if you were mayor, how
Yep.
could you make that whole unwieldy process of permitting, inspections, and approval? You know, someone mentioned New England Mobile Book Fair. They're still
Yep.
waiting to get their sign approved. They waited.
I
a really
think
long
with my
time for that.
experience being the head of the council and working with regard to that process, having a fully staffed planning department, understanding the need to have people cross-trained, fully trained on how we could not have someone come in, look for a building permit, someone's on vacation, they'll be back in 2 weeks. That process isn't working. You need someone who understands how the basic city functions work, and coordination of planning, inspectional service, engineering, how that all works is something that I have experience with. I just wanted to get back to your point, though, on the larger projects, and I do agree that that degree of uncertainty for larger petitioners to come in and spend a lot of money to talk to the city, develop plans, develop models, continuously come to committee process and talk to folks. And then at the end, there's that uncertainty about a vote. If you don't get 16 votes, you have 15 votes, you still don't get your permit. I think the proactive planning of being predictable in where we want to build in this city, along commercial corridors and in our residential areas and in those transition areas between business and residential, is vitally important. We haven't done a good job of that proactive planning. That will happen under my leadership as mayor, to be predictable, to bring business here, to make them feel that the permit process is not too unwieldy or they don't want to get into that unpredictability. That would be my role, to make sure that that works in the city.
Councilor Sangiolo, how do we erase Newton's reputation as a really tough place to do business?
So it is a really tough place to do business because we don't have anybody to assist our businesses, and that's been the problem for years. What we hopefully going forward, now that we have an economic development planner now that is going to, director that's going to help us streamline the process, we're going to move forward with an economic development strategic plan as well. I think those will help. Look, I was working with Tom Lyons on the New England Mobile Book Fair, moving them over from their current location to where they are now. It was unbelievable, the lack of coordination within our different departments, having to go to the fire department to go and get certain inspections done, having then to take that paperwork back to ISD or then go to engineering, getting a sign permit on top of that, and having to go through hoops. If we had that coordination, sort of the one-stop shopping kind of mentality, that would go a long way to make it easier for businesses to be able to thrive and locate here. In terms of, and as mayor, that is going to be a top priority for me. Scott was mentioning proactive planning and the need to do that. You know, we talk about developers and the unpredictability. Well, the problem is we don't have that plan. We don't have that vision. If we did what sort of whether it was Needham or what Wellesley did in terms of that Stop and Shop proposal over by Wellesley. If we looked at certain areas where we knew what we wanted, if we knew that we wanted 3 or 4 stories, if we knew that we wanted to rezone an entire corridor to MU4, that would give them the predictability that they need. That would give them the predictability and the timetable. Then you would eliminate the guesswork that goes into developing, trying to figure out, well, is this the right location? Is the city council and are the neighbors going to be on board? That's where the proactive planning and predictability will come in.
Okay. Anybody else have a specific idea how we enhance our reputation? We know it's a problem, so don't tell me that. Go ahead.
So I think actually for me, this comes down to a very, very simple concept. This is about people. See, I believe that honestly that the biggest problem we have for small business and the reputation that we've been dealing with is that people are not friendly in our city hall when it comes to business. If we literally just look at the people that are in city hall that talk to the average business, most people, whenever I've gotten a phone call, I'm sorry to go for a second on this, but whenever I've gotten phone calls from City Hall, it's mostly someone like a robot, essentially. They're not a robot. They feel like a robot telling me I owe them a fine or something of that sort. If someone simply called to say, hey, how's business? And I know we think that's a crazy idea. Why we shouldn't be having to cater to businesses like that. Yes, we should. We should look out for businesses in the way that we look out for people. Not that corporations are people. I don't mean to sound like that. But I'm saying that in honesty, it's a people problem. If we have better people that feel friendlier and come off friendlier to our businesses, people will want to work with us.
Mr. Cecchinelli, you had a specific idea?
I think we should look to technology to help us solve this. I think that we could install some type of computer program where our planning department and our engineering department and our inspectional services department and our fire department are all on the same page. So when you go in and apply for a permit, as soon as you're in the system, the fire department's notified that you need to be inspected. The inspectional services know that you need to be inspected. Instead of having to go from one floor to another floor to a different window in City Hall, it's all taken care of when you start. I think communication is the key to this. And I just like to disagree with Ellie. I find that at the City Hall, whenever I go into the City Hall with some type of problem, they're always helpful. I've yet to run into that. I hope that you're the exception, and I'm the rule with that. But I feel that everybody at City Hall that I always deal with is always pleasant.
Okay. I have one specific question that's not related so much to business, but to 3 of the candidates here. And this is, we have 3 very qualified city councilors, veteran city councilors, lots of experience, long tenure, really know the city in and out. And we have 3 other people on stage who are not that, have limited experience, and maybe you talk to someone at City Hall or whatever with it. I'd love to understand from the 3 of you why we should take you seriously on the stage of these 3 qualified people. Now you can start.
Well, I've been involved in Newton politics and community activity and community service for over 30 years. I'm a member of the Newton Republican City Committee, past first vice chair, past ward chairman. I'm on the board of directors of the Newton Taxpayers Association. For 30 years, I've worked with the Newton schools in their Career Vocational Technical Education Association, where we meet and we discuss the things involved in career tech voc ed in the high school. I think that all of that, combined with my past 3 times running for city councilor, actually back when it was an alderman, and my community service involved with Special Olympics, I think that I have a right to be up here. I think that I should be thought of on the same level. I don't believe that because I haven't held office before, it should be prohibitive. And I hope you'll all consider, looking at me as a serious candidate.
Great, thank you. Mr. Woodward, I'd love to know why we should consider you as a serious candidate as part of this group here.
Because I feel that at the end of the day, as I mentioned last night, throwing large sums of money at problems doesn't solve problems. It's finding creative solutions to problems that solves problems. I've had a whole career of finding creative solutions to problems that save people's lives from atherosclerosis, from pneumonia, from cancer. And so I think at the end of the day, a desire to serve your community and a desire to represent the citizens, all citizens, because as I say, we're a nation, not only a nation, but we're a city of the people, by the people, for the people. To represent all the people is the most important thing you can do, Mayor, and to provide creative solutions to the problems that face all the citizens of Newton is the best experience.
You did mention last night on the new League of Women Voters debate that you were this kind of frustration with it. Is there a specific thing about Newton that you think doesn't run well that really motivated you to be part of this? Or is it just a general?
I think a lot of things.
Give me one, because we don't have all morning, so give me one.
No, I think things run well, but I think that there are areas where creative solutions.
Can you give us one specific?
I think what we're talking about now, economic development. Another is elder care services. I think there could be creative solutions for that.
Great. Mr. Katzoff, your turn.
Thanks. So I think there are many ways to contribute to your city and many ways to be involved in your city. And I've been involved in this city since I could walk. I mean, I've lived here my whole life. I've worked here my whole life. I worked at Johnny's and Baker's Best, and I can give you a laundry list of other places I've been involved. I run my own company out of Newton. I employ people in Newton, and I work with businesses and people within Newton. I've always been involved in Newton. I found and that's more than anything, that's why you should take me seriously, because I have the dedication and the love for this city to run it well. And I also have the experience to run it well. And that's a bold statement, but it's something I stand by.
And is there a specific thing about Newton that made you want to be part of this?
Yeah, no, there really is. When I look around Newton, for me, I identified a real potential and a real problem at the same time, which is I believe that we are more disconnected than we need to be, or I'm sorry, more disconnected than we should be, and I believe we can become a lot more connected as a community and as people and as a city. And that's why I decided to run, because I wanted to find creative ways and creative solutions to connect us together.
Great. Thank you. All right, so let's talk about this area that we're in, the N-Squared Innovation District, and particularly Wells Ave. And if you drove in today, you saw on your left, and maybe you hadn't been down here a while, brand new building being developed. If you drove around the full circle at 180 Wells, you would see another building that's been entirely reskinned with an opportunity to build another building there. This beautiful building here, which was recently changed ownership, if you had been here a year ago, you would have been a lot less impressed by how beautiful it is. They've done incredible work here. Jumbo Capital, our hosts today. So, but meanwhile, we know that Wells Ave is fraught with problems. I mean, and Councilor Sangiolo, I want to start with you. What do you do as mayor to help the businesses in Wells Ave really make this the potential that it should be? And what should Wells Ave be?
So, I mean, first thing that we need to do is the access issue. If we want to increase more businesses to locate here, we need to do that. I come here often because I bring my mother to the Newton Wellesley Rehab Center. So I see what the issues are with traffic. We need to have more amenities here for our office workers. Ted Hesmahan and Greer Swiston and I, years ago, offered the docket item to introduce food trucks here so that we could have more restaurants or food establishments here in the city if the businesses weren't able to do that. So again, it's bringing in that vitality. That's what I would do in terms of helping Wells Ave. And we also have to look at zoning. I mean, if zoning is restricting, the deed restriction that we have, which prohibited us the ability to have the housing here, I think we have to look at that and work with the city council, again, to create the vitality that will make Wells Office Park succeed.
And are you willing to invest city funds in that second egress or take out the loans?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Councilor Lennon, we're going to just start with that. Would you willing to invest money for a second egress here?
Yes, I think it's vital. I mean, if we're going to continue to improve the area, when we talked about that development previously, the second means of egress is something that definitely needs to be further explored. I know we are going to have to do that somewhat in partnership with Mount Ida, with Nahanton Woods. I think having a second means of egress that comes right back out onto Nahanton Street, somewhat defeating the purpose. So I think we have to get creative with what we're looking at. To your bigger question, Greg, about Wells Avenue, I think like you've done with N2, it's about branding the area in a good way. And what I mean by that is we would like to do here is have the businesses invest, but also the need for the city to invest, to make improvements, amenities that Councilor Sangiolo is talking about, access. We drove in today, you mentioned I saw 2 signs. One was a little tiny square this big that said Newton Wellesley Rehab, and the other one was a green and white city sign that just said Wells Avenue. People need to know that Wells Avenue exists, that it has the ability to attract business, workers, amenities, not only just the food trucks, which I understand we'll be piloting here, but also the surrounding amenities, the bike paths, the access to recreation for workers, the shuttle services that I think we need to improve in the area, and continue to brand this as a place to do business like we're trying to do from the Charles River Mill District area, the birthplace of the idea of Michael Grill, who's mentioned to me, who worked on in Charles River, on Chapel Street, came over, wanted to talk about how we could engage Newton, Waltham, Watertown to brand that area. And that's what we're doing now. I would be prepared to make the city investment to do a number of different things in terms of accessibility and creating that brand or assisting that brand, because it's clear that the business owners want to invest as well. We need to do that collaboratively. We need to do that as a partnership. And they would definitely have a partner in the executive office when I am there.
Mr. Woodward, any specific ideas about how we fix Wells Ave and make it more attractive and vibrant?
I think, as both Scott and Bruce have mentioned,
Yeah, hold the mic to you.
I think perception is everything. And if we don't appear as a welcoming, friendly, hospitable place for business, and part of that is also what Scott mentioned about signs, then you're going to detract people from wanting to have their business.
Councillor Fuller, are you ready to commit city funds to build a second egress out of Wells Ave?
I think you're thinking too narrowly. All of us have been talking about a second means of access. Actually, we should be thinking bigger. It actually may be better for the residential areas around here and the office park if we actually think about 3 means of egress and access. So don't think so narrowly.
With city dollars?
Yeah, the city is absolutely going to be a partner in this. Hopefully the Wells Office Park will chip in too. But so let's talk about getting people in and out. One of that, you're focusing specifically on cars, but we have to figure out a way to get people from, whether it's Elliott Street, the Needham commuter rail, whether it's Newton Highlands, not to here to Wells Avenue and over to Needham Street. There's gonna have a public-private partnership on a shuttle is gonna be essential. It's the only way forward. And yes, we've gotta make this safe for people walking through Wells Office Park, maybe down over to the Charles River, and by bikes. You know, let's think about a bike share thing. Can we do something with Needham Street and Wells Office Avenue and with our T-stops? Boy, there's something exciting there. Sorry about that. So we also do have to think about growth here. Let's proactively plan. So how big should the square footage be here at Wells Avenue? How far up can we go? And what do you need to do that? What restaurants have to be here? Do you need a drugstore here? Are we expecting everybody to get from here over to Needham Street? Are food trucks enough to do that? So transportation, growth, and also don't forget the nonprofits in all this. We tend to talk a lot about businesses. There are a lot of nonprofits right here in the office park. Let's keep thinking about them as well.
Mr. Katzoff, any specific thoughts about this place?
Yeah, so to be brief, I know. There are three ways that we make this place more attractive, in my opinion. I bike here a lot. And I can say, first of all, bikes. Yes, no question about it. We're talking about transportation as a whole. Even biking here this morning, I was almost hit like twice. You know, that's normal. You just have to be very vigilant. but that shouldn't be the case. So we should be creating much better bike routes. We need to be creating shuttle services that go from the Highlands and even the center to bring people in here. We need to be, that's all short term though. I think long-term planning, we need to create housing opportunities for people that work within this area. This is a thriving business park. Nonprofit, for-profit, there is no question people want to be here, but they're scared to be here because they got to sit in traffic for like 3 hours before they can even get into work for the day. It's a huge commitment. On top of that, we need to bring in service industries to this area. And what I mean by that is specifically food industries, even doing your laundry and things like that. We're talking about service-based industries that can cater to the types of industry, the bigger industry that we're bringing in here. By bigger, I mean maybe we'll call it like foreign industry. I don't need that to be as local as I want the local industry to be service-based industry.
Al, did you have something you wanted to add there? If not, I'd be happy to move on. So,
No, I think that the egress is an issue here. I also think that branding is an issue. I didn't know this place existed till I got here today. Signage is an issue. We need to have some type of a way of people to know that this is here, and I think that that would help develop the area.
great, thank you. Sorry. So, I wanted to talk also about Washington Street, but we are running short on time. Do any of you have, and if you don't have, I would ask you to pass in the interest of time, a vision for what Washington Street should look like in 10 or 15 years? Councilor Foley, you want to go first?
I actually do think I have a vision for that. First of all, I imagine a change in literally the roadway, so that it is safe for bicyclists and pedestrians. So, and it's just not for cars. So that's one change. I see us thinking and planning so that we imagine where do we want just one-story buildings, where two-story, where three, where four-story buildings, so that I do see kind of these roof lines going up and down. I also see this mix between arts and nonprofits and businesses along that corridor there. There's a little bit of it's a fledgling idea right now. I think we can build on that. I do see partnerships with the MBTA so that the accessibility down to the commuter rail is improved, and boy, we should be advocating for better frequency. So I see that happening. I actually also just see it visually changing. Right now, boy, it's kind of an unattractive corridor, whether you're on foot or in the car. Let's proactively plan the whole landscaping, and also the one other thing that you actually have to plan for. All of us know about the specter of climate change coming. Maybe it's already here. I also see us reimagining all the impervious surface there. You know, do the berms change so that it works for stormwater? It just it works environmentally as well as
Anybody else have a
economically.
specific idea or vision of what Washington Street would look like in 10 or 15 years?
Ideally, Greg, I like to think bold. I'd love to see development of air rights all along Washington Street. I know that it's a difficult concept. The conversation usually always stops at the cost. I understand that there would have to be a number of regulatory things that would have to be looked into, but visually, if I'm looking at a vision 5, 10, 15 years, I think you need to start in Newton Corner, where you have some opportunity there. If we're really going to keep Newton Corner as the transportation area of that regional issue, what I believe is a regional issue, Newton Corner is not just a Newton problem. It's a Waltham, Watertown, Alston, Brighton issue. I think we need to look very hard at and work very diligently with the DOT on how we can improve that area. There are 100,000 cars a day going through there. If we're going to have that level of volume and we want to put people on ridership, and we need to create a way to make that a vibrant village center that was split by the Pike years ago, we need to take a long, hard look at planning. Moving there down Washington Street towards West Newton, there's plenty of opportunity, but it should be predictable for folks. They should understand what we want to do. I do see the ability for all modes of transportation along Washington Street. Having a bike lane that may go from Newton Corner all the way to Lower Falls. I think that would be a great idea. I think we need to look big. I think we need to be bold in our vision and how we can improve what is really I see as a business corridor, but be sensitive, because we do have residential areas that abut that, those transition areas I was talking about before. But I think if we have those conversations moving forward from Newton Corner all the way down to Lower Falls, we're doing some great improvements in West Newton. I think that we have an opportunity to make a real a corridor that folks in Newton can be active in, that business can happen in, and that residents can be proud of.
Great. Councilor Sangiolo, you got a good idea for Washington Street?
Yes, and he
future
took
vision?
my word bold. Bold is all about me. So what I like to see, that's okay. I love Scott. So what I'd like to see is the development of air rights, but not development. I want to see a greenway. I want to see the Mass Pike buried in 10 or 15 years. I think we can do that. I think if we have a sort of our own Newton Greenway along Washington Street, then we can look at the rest of the corridor, a boulevard, perhaps all the way from Lower Falls and Wellesley and all the way down to Newton Corner, where we'll also have 3 or 4 story businesses, again, working with the residents, trying to, again, make it more vibrant, narrow the streets, make it so that it's not just car friendly, make it so that we have protected bike lanes that go all the way down the stretch of the Washington Street corridor. Again, it all requires planning, and it requires a lot of investment, and I'm willing to do that.
Great. Anybody else have a great vision for Washington Street?
I actually agree with both Amy and Scott with the development of the air rights, but I think that we should have a mixed use, not just green, not just housing or businesses. I think we do need a lot of green there, but I think that to make it palatable for people to invest and do the work, we have to give them a business opportunity also.
Mr. Woodward, do you have a vision? Anything you want to share on that? If not,
Yes, I was asked by John Hilliard how is Newton going to fulfill its Chapter 40B obligations, and that even though Newton already does fulfill it in having reserves for affordable housing. The air rights over the Turnpike, there's 2 businesses, a hotel and Star Market, that currently have air rights over the Turnpike. I mentioned to him that between the Walnut Street Bridge and the Harvard Street Bridge, it's already sort of sunken, and you could fill that over. There have been many case studies of abandoned railways, and because currently the Turnpike looks like a strip mine going through Newton, and you could build parks and housing on top, and also commercial units.
So I'm going to actually, before we get to you, just one question. You mentioned the 40B thing, and I'm sorry to the audience that I can't explain the whole nuance of this, but so Newton, the city has claimed it's met its 40B threshold. It's controversial. It's in the courts. Show of hands, who believes that Newton has achieved its 40B threshold, don't believe it has, or aren't sure because they're not a lawyer? Or so who believes we've achieved it? Anyone here besides Mr. Woodward? Do you believe we've achieved it? Anyone not believe we haven't achieved it? Wait, before we get, just to show hands, you think that we haven't achieved it? And anybody not sure because they're waiting for the legal ruling on it? Is that where you are? You can't raise your hand. Okay, Councilor, but I want to get back to the question.
So I just
Really
want to answer
quick.
that. It's not a simple question. I think that's where Ruthanne is going, because I believe we've met the 1.5% land area requirement that we needed to meet. I don't believe we've met the 10%, and we're not going to make the 10% requirement for affordable housing unless we adopt a multi-pronged approach. We cannot build our way to affordability. We have to use preservation as another tool, as well as approving moderate scale development, as well as making sure that we have preservation restrictions on these affordable housing units in perpetuity. We're losing units because we haven't done that in the past. That's something that we need to do. Again, create a municipal housing trust using CPA money. Again, it goes to investment.
Okay, Councilor Fuller, please. You can quickly answer that, but then get back to the larger
Actually, I
question.
want to get back to the larger question.
you.
I'm happy to come back,
Yep.
which is I just want to push back. I believe in planning. I believe in being proactive. I believe in being bold. But I also believe that we have to have our feet on our ground and understand some realities. One of the ways I got involved with the City of Newton was through the Citizen Advisory Group. I was vice chair, and we looked hard at the air rights over the Mass Pike. I don't think any of us are going to be willing to go that route. You know why? It is so darn expensive to build over the Mass Pike that would require a density that I don't think we will be able to tolerate. That would require 10-story buildings right there. So I'm willing to look. In the intervening years since then, I've met with a developer who's trying to do it further down in Boston. Boy, do you know what the costs are involved with that? So I'll keep an open mind. I'll look at it, but I don't see that in the next 20 years here in Newton.
Councilor Lennon, you want to respond
put a
briefly, and
level
then
of
I do want to
caution
move
on
on.
I just think it's fair. Your question was about vision. That was what your question was about, and looking out. And I believe I started my remarks by saying I understand the costs, the regulatory issues that may come with that. But your question was about vision. The morning has been about looking at vision and where we could go. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to build 10-story buildings. I also mentioned there would be a lot of things that have to happen in terms of having additional land that's part of that abuts the pike. But
I'm gonna ask if we move
yeah.
on. I've got
But I just want to be
27
really
more
clear
questions
about
and
that when you talk
10
about
minutes.
vision
Yeah, okay.
looking forward
Got
here
it.
in the city, I think that's something that a mayor needs to do.
Okay, I actually have two more questions. So we've all already expressed our compassion for the small business owners and the desire to keep them here, and small property owners. As you know, business owners, commercial property owners pay a higher tax rate on property tax than residents do. But also, if you own a business in the city, you're not also fortunate enough to live in this great city, you don't get a vote if you ask for an override. So are you going to ask Newton voters to raise our property taxes in your first term? Yes, you are, or no, you're going to speak?
Yes, I am.
Or you can tell us why.
Okay, so we are already looking at tight school budgets. We have to look at investment in our capital needs. We are going to have to do that. I believe in year one we plan, in year two we execute. That's the only way to do it. It's all well and good to say, oh, we're going to have an economic development plan and we're going to build increase our business and go after our businesses for more taxes and go after our nonprofits to get more money, payments in lieu of taxes. That's all well and good, but what we really need to do is make sure that our residents and our community partners, that we're all willing to invest. And that's why I'm running, to make sure that we continue to invest in our city. The health and well-being of our city helps all the businesses and nonprofits thrive. That's why I would go and propose that in year one, we plan, year two, we execute.
Great. Mr. Cecchinelli, while we're down there, are you going to ask for an override in your first term?
No, I am not. I'm against overrides. As all of you know, you have a budget to work with. We have an idea of what we have to work with. We just have to use our money better. We can't be giving contracts that we know we're not going to be able to achieve without an override. We have to look at where the spending is. We need to fix our problems, and we cannot ask you people to pay for our past problems. We need to fix these problems without burdening the business people or the citizens of the city.
Great. Councilor Lennon?
I'm going to be very I'm gonna look very carefully, Greg, as we move forward in my first 4 years. I think the best way to go with regard to overrides is our debt exclusion overrides, to look at our capital projects. I think that's a smart way to go, seeing that our based on our bond rating, we are able to borrow at lower interest rates right now. In terms of a general operating override, as someone who works with a budget on a day-to-day basis, I want to get back to Mr. Woodward's question that as someone who does not throw money at a problem, I manage a budget on a day-to-day basis. I will look very closely and at the needs of what we want to do here in this city, and that before I go to the voters of the city to ask them for an override on a plan that I would sell, I would want to be crystal clear about what it is that we're asking for, what those needs are, what that investment in the community is, and then how we can also potentially help people that are on the other end of the spectrum or barely making ends meet, how that would impact them. So before I came out very aggressively looking for something, I want to do a full-scale review of every department, every community need, and if there is that need, which I think we will need, if there is that need, I will be the one out that's selling that override package.
Mr. Woodward, would you ask for an override in your first term as mayor?
Well, I guess one topic that hasn't been...
Can you answer that question?
Well, because the current situation is that the real estate tax has actually been increased twice in the last 12 months, and there's been no articles written about it in the newspapers, which is very interesting. It's been silent. There's been silence, total silence.
I'm not quite sure how that happened.
So I don't think an override is a
So no, you would not ask for an override in your first term as mayor?
I think they've already increased taxes.
Well, they increase under Proposition 2.5. But Councillor Fuller, would you ask voters for an override in your first term as mayor?
What I'm going to do is, as mayor, first year in office is do a complete financial plan for the next 10 years so that we can answer that question. I don't think any of us should be saying yes or no to that question today. We have 3 serious financial challenges facing us. $1 billion that we owe our retirees that we haven't yet funded, capital infrastructure needs that are significant, our roads, our school buildings, our senior center, our fire stations, our police headquarters, the bathhouse at Crystal Lake. And third, compensation. As inflation rate is ticking up, that's putting pressure on compensation. And you know, compensation is 85% of our school budget, plus healthcare costs are going up. That's a big deal. We're going to have to really look through each line item to say, how are we going to deliver these services as effectively and efficiently as possible? How are we going to increase commercial office and retail taxes by making this a more attractive place to be?
So if I could, pardon me for interrupting with you. So
No
I want to push back on you and both,
Yes.
Councillor Lennon, for a second. You've both been councillors for a long time. You've scrutinized the budget. You were for many, many years. How is it that you can't say you would know whether we need one or not? How could you not know what the trend is and where we are on it? And then I'll get to you, I promise.
Because we do not have a detailed, thoughtful, robust financial plan yet for this city. We
Okay,
don't.
Councillor Lennon,
We've got a slim booklet of our forecast, and that's it.
Councillor Lennon, why should you not know while Councillor Sangiolo does know whether we need it or not?
Well, again, it comes back to how we plan here in the city, Greg. I think you know when we go through the budget, as Councilor Fuller had just mentioned, we have a budget, we have a forecast, we have a capital improvement plan. Those are not priorities and approaches that are set by the mayor. Those are given to us during budget. We go through them. We spend our 45 days analyzing those priorities and what that approach is of the executive office.
Shouldn't you know where the trends are and what the needs are?
We don't know. We do know where the trends are. I think I said at the end of my comments, Greg, that we eventually, I believe, will need one. Maybe not in the first term, but having that financial plan moving forward, bringing all those pieces together. Debt exclusion, yes, I think that's smart for capital and capital projects where we're going. But again, I want to just understand the needs that we have, the priorities that we have, and we will develop that. And if there's the need for an override, I will be the one out that sells it.
Great. Okay. Ellie Katzoff.
So without a question, we have to come up with a plan. That's always the case. I agree. And I think that it would be irresponsible of me to tell you yes or no on a hard question like that right now, because we don't yet completely know everything that's going to happen in the next 4 years. And that's why I think this is really a question of trust. It's a question of, can you trust the mayor of the city will be transparent, will take you into account, and will really ask you if things like an override for taxes, which are already very high and already are a burden on all of us, we need to be taking each other into account. As mayor of the city, if we have to do a tax override, if we have to raise taxes, or even if we're going to be lowering taxes, these are things that have to be transparent, marketed, and sold. As Scott's saying, it has to be something that, and as mayor, I would take the responsibility of that.
So let me ask you a question, and we'll go down the table on this one. So what is the most unpopular decision you expect to make in your first year as mayor?
Oh, jeez. You want to really, no, here's a policy that I would push for that would be extremely unpopular in Newton, but I think to me personally would be so important. When we talk, this is not about necessarily business really necessarily, but I think it's within our schools. Something that I would actually advocate for that will be absolutely unpopular being on a school committee would be the idea of saying that I think every kid in grade school should have free time all day. They should explore the world, they should see the world, and we should stop putting such a focus on them getting into Harvard and Yale or becoming lawyers, doctors, and dentists when there are so many other industries and so many other professions that they can one day reach. And to do that, they have to explore, they have to branch out as kids, and they've got to build self-esteem. So I think that saying bluntly that I think that kids should have free time all day in grade school is so unpopular, so scary, and will put our whole city into a panic.
Councillor Fuller, what's the most unpopular decision you expect to make in your first year as our mayor?
Here's at least one. There may be more. So when we hire an employee and we bring them on to the city payroll right now, we figure out the wages, we figure out their current benefits, what do we need to pay for their health insurance. We set aside money for pensions, and you know what we don't do? We don't set aside the money for their retiree health care, and it's really expensive. It should be 12% of their salary in addition to
So
their
what would you
salary.
do that will make you
There we go.
unpopular?
What's going to happen is as we bring on people and our current people, we've actually got to set aside that money now. That's going to raise all the costs in the city because we're mainly, most of our costs are payroll. So automatically overnight, the real costs of running the city are going to go up, and that's going to crowd out other things that we would love to do. But it's setting us up, it's paying now for what we should be paying for and not kicking the can down the road to future generations. It's going to be expensive, and I'm going to move towards that.
Mr. Woodward, what's the most unpopular thing you're going to do?
Well, it's interesting you're talking about economics and popular decision making, because a German friend of mine told me that in Germany they say the friendship ends where the money begins, and I guess balancing a budget, I would hope to please everybody, but at the end of the day, making a balanced budget can sometimes please some people and not please other people.
Councillor Lennon, what are you going to do that's
Thank you.
unpopular?
Sounds like Councilor Fuller was setting us up for an override. That's what it sounded like. But I think the most difficult thing that I found on the council, Greg, and being president of the council too, is oftentimes having to say no. I think that that's a difficult thing to do. There will be many unpopular decisions.
Can you give us one?
I can't put my finger on it right now, just to be quite honest with you. There will be a number of probably spending decisions that will have to be made, priorities that will have to be shifted, that things could have been in the queue to have done over the course of the next couple of years that may not get done. And I think that dealing with city employees, dealing with other elected officials in terms of priorities and what they would like to do as president of the council and being a manager of the council, it's a difficult thing to do. And I think you step up to have this job to make difficult decisions, and I'll look forward to making those difficult decisions over the next 4 years.
Councillor Sangiolo.
So I think think I already said what the most unpopular thing I will do, and that would be in my first term is going to the voters and asking for an override. Not everyone's going to get their wish list. We're going to have to really dig deep and figure out what the community's priorities are, but that will be the number one. Probably
Mr.
difficult.
Cecchinelli, it's all yours.
I think the most popular with a portion of our citizens is going to be my ability and my need to work with the federal government, and not just ICE, but with the DEA and the FBI and all the other law enforcement agencies in the country, and have our police cooperate with them. I think that by saying we're not going to cooperate with one section of the federal government because we don't agree with the law is wrong. And I'd also like to address the set aside for the health care. I know, and you all know, that when you set up a 401k retirement program for your employees, you don't pay for it all. This needs to be a partnership between the employee and the employer. So maybe of the $12 we set aside, maybe we could set aside $4 and the employee could set aside $8.
Great. I'm going to stop you right there, and I can't let that go. Does anyone here else share Mr. Cecchinelli's desire to cooperate with federal officials on foreign immigration? Anyone agree with that? Okay. Thank you all very much. So let's give them a big round of applause. They're all on the road every night and don't see their families. They were debating last night. They're here again this morning. We're very grateful to all of you for running. And just to clarify for everyone, so these 6 candidates, as well as Rich Saunders, who was unable to be here with us tonight, will be on the ballot on September 12th. And after that, there'll be 2 candidates who will go on to the finals in November, and one of them will be mayor in January. So thank you all very much for being here.